Catherine. Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Good afternoon where I am, but good afternoon, good morning, whatever, middle of the night, wherever you are around the world. Thanks for joining us today to talk about Crosswalk. I'm Rick Bawcum. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Construction Specifications Institute, or CSI. I'm joined today by Ken Monblatt, who is our product manager for the Crosswalk product. He's a colleague that has been working with me for a number of years, about 30, I think now. So quite a few years together. Sounds like I've lost my microphone. Ken, are you hearing me okay?
I can hear you now.
Now you are. You're okay now.
Yeah, we're all having technical trouble today, right? So as I was saying, Ken's going to monitor the chat and the Q&A, and we'll also be answering questions on the support desk Crosswalk on the Slack channel as well. So let's dive in. I'll spend just a second here talking about CSI and standards. If you're not familiar with Construction Specifications Institute, they've been around since the 40s. They do really interesting work around standards. Standards isn't always the sexiest topic, but we all use standards every day. You know, we all stop at stoplights. We all use the same units of measurement for whatever locale works for us. And standards are important in our lives, and they're certainly important in the built environment. CSI has been the author and facilitator of Master Format, which is probably most familiar in the marketplace in terms of being used in the specification and design side of the built environment. Also, the other standards that you'll hear us talking about in Crosswalk is OmniClass and Uniformat. Those are two other CSI standards that are in the Crosswalk product and come into play at different points in the life cycle. So that's a little bit about CSI. CSI is happy to and thrilled to be supporting and sponsoring the AEC Hackathon. We see it as an important part of keeping the digital transformation in one of the least digitized industries, is what McKinsey says, that AEC is one of the least digitized industries in the world. So we're happy to be a supporter. So let's talk about the problem space we're trying to address. We all know the problem is that the industry, the construction space is highly fragmented. Most people don't work for the same firm in terms of working throughout the life cycle of the building project. There's lots of manual processes that tend to create delays in information and all kinds of format challenges and incompatible systems that folks are using. Wherever you fit into this life cycle, there's lots of challenges in terms of making information flow thoroughly and accurately throughout the life cycle. So this is the problem space that CSI is looking to attack with the Crosswalk product. Again, the standards have been out there for a while, but they haven't been as digital as they needed to be, and Crosswalk is solving for that problem. Why is classification important? Well, you know, as I said earlier, accuracy, safety, efficiency, aesthetics, all of those things are important when you're classifying things. If you're walking down the street and someone tells you there's a cat crossing the road, you probably want to know if it's a kitten or a lion. So, you know, those things, classifying things is important. Same thing in the built environment. If you're using brick in an application, it's probably important to know if it's fire brick or paving brick. So classifying things in the built environment is a critical part of critical or efficient communication flow. Why digital matters? CSI, as I said, has been around since the 40s with these standards, but we haven't been as digital as we would like to have been. In the past, what we've done is as the new versions of Master Format or one of the other standards came out, we tended to give you a book and a spreadsheet, and you know, pretty much said, good luck with that. You know, if you need to do curation, you need to do it on your own, and that's how we did it in the past. Starting a few years ago, we started talking about how do we solve for that problem and make that a more responsive and more live access kind of method for accessing the standards. Because we do know there's lots of tools out there that folks are using. Everybody has their favorite. If you're a designer, you're using your favorite tools. And if you're a facilities manager or building owner, you're using your favorite tools. And sometimes those standards that you're looking for are different or a different part of the life cycle that you need to be looking at. So we wanted to create something that created the cross-references between the standards based on your need and where you are in the life cycle. And we wanted to build something that fits into the existing tool sets. So we're not building another end user product. It's a business to business kind of model. So what we've built here is a platform and an API set that plugs into via the API's existing AEC tools in the marketplace. We did want it, and we do want it. We believe it serves a need for being a translator for the standards. The standards tend to apply not so much that they're different standards. What they tend to do is apply based on where you are in the project lifecycle. So if you're a designer or a specifier, you tend to be centric towards master format. If you're a facilities manager or a building owner, you tend to want to look at things in the uniformat taxonomy. All of them look at the same body of knowledge in the built environment. They're just a different view or a different lens into where you are in the project lifecycle. So we know that digital matters in this space because it's highly complex to try to do all of that curation and cross-referencing and translation on your own. And CSI has been in that business since the 40s, so we know that that's a space that we can help solve for that problem so that you can do other things that add more value to your product. We have had several of our software providers tell us that it's what we're doing with Crosswalk is saving them hundreds of hours in terms of how they're approaching integrating the standards into their software products and portals. If you just did the math, that's a lot of dollars. Those dollars can go back into working with your software products to create features that add value to them. So this is the target for us, is to try to make you more productive as you build software and portals. The solution set, as I said, we're trying to bridge this digital divide between the standards and the software products that are out there today. Between the applications and the practitioners and the standards, we've built an API set that we've branded as Crosswalk, and I think you'll see why in a minute as we talk through some of the use cases, that it's very specific about being able to walk through the standards, what I think of as in 2 dimensions. So and what I mean by that is the standards a standard tends to progress over time. Master format has progressed roughly every 2 years since it started. And then the other standards progress on a little bit less frequent cycle, but still there's quite a few endpoints. If you can imagine just doing the math, that multiplication every time it changes, there's a number of endpoints in that complex standards navigation that you have to do every time it changes. The other thing that's complicated is how do you move from master format through OmniClass or to uniformat and make those translations between those things. It's very, very difficult for software providers and portal providers to do that work on their own. So again, that's what Crosswalk is all about, is giving you the crosswalks and translations between the standards and between versions of the standards. Both of those dimensions are kind of important. Today, we're hooking up to the standards in terms of our API. For us, standards are reference data, and we hope to add more standards to our data set as we move on. We have originally incorporated the 3 standards that CSI has put out and published, and then we hope to add other standards, the ones that we get requested sometimes and that we're pivoting to now is the Uniformat 2 and some of the things from Uniclass from the EU standards, and we've got our eyes on things like the IFCs and other things that fit into that BIM world a little bit better. We're trying to close that productivity gap that we talked about earlier by eliminating the need to manually curate standards information. That's been a huge problem for folks, whether you're a software provider or a portal operator, or even if you're running a local office for a design firm just trying to deal with if you pull an old project off the shelf and you want to use a newer version of the standard, that's been a difficult challenge for folks in terms of reuse, which we know adds to some efficiency if you can just pull things off the shelf and work in that way. We wanted to provide a real-time web access to the standards and formats, and you'll see how we've done that in just a minute. And we wanted to automate all that cross-referencing process between standards and versions of the standards. So those 3 bullet points on the top here are the ones that are in Crosswalk today. All of those things are available to you as you're working through your projects during the hackathon, and certainly as you take this API back out to your work environments, those 3 things are available today as a product, which is Crosswalk. And we'll talk in a minute about how you can get access to it. The bottom 2 bullet points here are things that we're starting to pivot to. We know that as the API starts getting used, that you'll start seeing data and metadata that we can start making use of. And there's a number of use cases that we think we can help provide data as a service back to the application folks who are trying to incorporate new features into their products, and data as a service is certainly on our roadmap. And of course, we wanted it to be secure, timely, and accurate in terms of the classification tools. So that's what we hope to do with closing the productivity gap with Crosswalk. This is the roadmap that we're operating on right now. We are with Crosswalk on the first stop of this roadmap, which we're calling classification as a service. It's the API, and the API is something that you can plug into your existing software and portals. And we'll talk about how that thing fits together a bit here in just a second. But that's very much where we have been working for the past 10 or 12 months. And we formally launched this to market on May the 4th, I believe it was. We had about a dozen companies that worked with us in our MVP or early exposure program who exercised the product and then told us some things that they wanted to see in addition to, and a number of those things we were able to include in the product as we brought it to market. So Crosswalk as it exists today is this first stop on our roadmap. And we're starting to pivot now into the second stop on our roadmap, which we're calling Augmented Design, or AI enabled. It's fundamentally about machine learning and artificial intelligence and those tools in that smart machine space that we can start applying to the data and metadata that we are accumulating throughout the network. So those things are things that we think, again, we can play back in terms of wizards and upvoting, crowdsourcing, those kinds of things that we think we can do there. Ken, I'm seeing some things that look like they're in the chat, so just jump in anytime. Oh, I see. Oh, that was when I lost audio. Okay, we're good. So that's the second stop on our roadmap. The third stop on our roadmap involves blockchain, not Bitcoin, but blockchain. We're going to look at using the blockchain to put together a fabric for the construction industry around things like that are involving trust and transparency. The things that always come to mind for me are version control, chain of custody, those kinds of things. I used to own a construction company, so I know some of the challenges about finding the latest copy of this or the latest version of that. There's a number of things that we think we can do as an operator of a fabric, a blockchain fabric for the construction industry. So that's our third stop on our roadmap, and the fourth stop is in what we're calling Internet of Construction Things. We all know that the job sites are getting smarter. It's rare to walk onto a job site that doesn't have quite a bit of Wi-Fi and data capabilities on the job site. And certainly when you get into the operations side, almost everything is getting smart now. You've got equipment that's reporting back status, and one of the more interesting use cases that I have run across was yesterday. I was talking to someone who makes trash cans that sit on the corners of these urban environments that I live in, and it's reporting back environmental conditions and temperatures, and in addition to reporting whether the trash can's full or not. So we're going to see everything from the trash cans on the street corners to the HVAC units and portals, that people pass through, getting a lot smarter. And so we know that there's a lot of things that we can do with data that flows through the Internet of Things as we connect all of this built environment together. And again, it's a place where we think we can provide anonymized data products back to the marketplace for things like manufacturing, optimizing manufacturing, and so forth. So that's our high-level roadmap. Advance here. So each one of these has a slide about the use case. I won't belabor that too much, but I will stop here on the classification as a service because it's where Crosswalk is today. The use case is to provide classification data along with the crosswalks between those standards as digital payloads back to your software tools. So it's live versions of the standards, all versions of master format since 1995, all of the versions of OmniClass, and all the versions of Uniformat as published by CSI are included in the API, along with crosswalks between those two, or between those three. So if you need to pull an old project off the shelf that uses master format 95, you need to move it forward to what's about to be, I believe, master format 2019 is about to come hot off the presses. Then you can do that using the API by moving that forward using the classification as a service system. We know that the standards and translations are the crosswalks between those are important to you, and that's why we chose to put Crosswalk out there around that, as it's, I believe we're at the 2.0 version of the product today. We're looking at things like product lookups and metadata capture and BIM support. We hope that the hackathon is going to help us with some of this. And if you're interested in using the API, stick around at, I believe, 3 o'clock. We're going to talk about the Crosswalk Challenge because we're putting up some pretty good prizes for doing things like connecting the API and your hack project to those kinds of systems. So we'll talk about that some more at 3 o'clock, but we're looking to get some more guidance about what the marketplace wants there around products and BIM support. We have had a number of people in our early exposure program who are very product oriented, who are looking at using the API to tag their product data sets, and they're experiencing some pretty significant success in that area. Other places where we're looking at code sets and safety standards, those kinds of things are also coming to bear in our MVP program. So again, the second stop, augmented design. This is where we apply the machine and the analytics to drive things like project scheduling, product manufacturing. I'm old enough to have been in business school when we all talked about just-in-time manufacturing. Well, this is the kind of stuff that can make that happen. We know that if we could figure out in the design phase that a certain kind of HVAC unit or some kind of other big infrastructure product is needed, then we can get ahead of that in terms of the manufacturing cycle and optimize when those things can be manufactured and delivered, and optimize things like warehousing and scheduling and transportation. All of those things are on the radar screen for the data that we can see floating around in this ecosystem of things as it's used in the design phase. So we know that there are things that we can do there. There's some other interesting use cases there around crowdsourcing and wizards. Not so much that we're looking to build those wizards. We're going to provide the data back to you that drives that functionality in your user experience. So if you are in a position where you've got a product that does something, like Amazon or some of those products where you're looking for some crowdsourcing and wizards, then we believe we can help drive the data around that because of what we're doing in the phase one piece of this with connecting folks to the API. An interesting use case here would be qualifying products based on the location of the project at some point, so that your software could be smart enough to know that, I'm building a project here, and because this code set is applicable in that particular location, we think we can help bring some of that to the table in terms of data as a service. Not there today, but we're working on trying to make that part of our product set. Steve, I see you popped on there just briefly, so let me know if you need something. The third stop on this, the third use case, is trust and transparency. Blockchain, again, not Bitcoin, but the ledger, the fabric, to provide things like identity confidentiality, version control, chain of custody. If you're in the commercial construction environment, you're building a hospital, it's important to know where that MRI machine was manufactured, who had their hands on it, who took care of it, what's the maintenance schedule. All of those kinds of things can be managed through the blockchain in terms of chain of custody, those kinds of things. Confidentiality and certainly change and version control, a natural application for the blockchain fabric. The fourth stop, again, is kind of an unlimited who knows what happens here with the Internet of Things. Again, everything's getting smarter. The metric that I've used in the past, was how cheap it is now to put compute, Wi-Fi, and location awareness on anything out in the built environment. And the metric that I read most recently was it's now at scale. You can add those three services to anything for 36 cents, right? 36 cents. So for a third of a dollar, you can add Wi-Fi, compute, and location awareness to anything in a footprint that's the size of your thumbnail. So everything's going to get smarter on the job site. And again, the most interesting use case I've talked about this week was smart trash cans on the street corners of our urban environment. So we know that there's a lot of data here, and because of the fabric that we're going to build in the earlier parts of our roadmap, we see this as an extremely important part of how we can play data as a service back to your applications. It's important here to kind of note that CSI is a nonprofit, so don't have quite the same kind of dynamics in terms of the marketplace that others might have. So we think there's a unique spot that CSI can fulfill there in terms of being a neutral arbiter here of how data flows and how things flow around this ecosystem. This is all of that on one page. It's the service architecture. As you can see, it's everything I've just talked about, and it's flowing from left to right. Classification as a service is what we've put in place today. It's the user experience, again, is not what we're doing. We're leaving that to folks like you so that you can do your design and specification and maintenance and those kinds of applications, incorporating the Crosswalk API for classification as a service. Gets rid of all that curation challenge that folks have had in the past, and it's connected to the standards today. Again, the three master format, omni-class, and uniformat are the ones that are included in the product today. We're, again, starting to pivot to product catalogs and trying to get you connected to things that might allow you to select products as a piece of the navigation, as well as things like safety standards and those kinds of things that are out there. Again, moving to the right, augmented design, trust and transparency, Internet of Construction things, all of these things on our roadmap. I don't have a time frame for when all of those are going to be there. I do know that the first stop on the roadmap is there today, and we're adding products to that. We are pivoting to the second stop, which is augmented design. So we're getting into that space quite heavily, and then we'll take the market feedback about what happens with stops 3 and 4, but we feel like they'll come along pretty quickly as the market drives us towards that. CSI has been very aggressive about putting together the resources that are needed to pull this off. So we're excited about that level of enthusiasm about getting the standards into the digital space now. This is our reference architecture. It's how we built this thing conceptually. We started with the idea that we wanted it to be a web-based service. We wanted it to be APIs, and we certainly went that direction. We built an information architecture on top of that handles all the data access and data quality. And I always make note here that we built our information architecture around OmniClass. OmniClass is a wrapper for the other standards and includes master format in the table structure as well as uniformat. So you lose nothing if you want to just use master format in a specifications application. You can certainly pull just the master format information out. And if you need to crosswalk it over to OmniClass or uniformat, you can certainly do that. So all of those standards are available either individually or holistically inside of the product. But we did use a kind of an omni-class approach in terms of how we put this together. On top of that, we built the messaging architecture on a RESTful state API. The payloads are XML and JSON, which are industry standard. We just recently added GraphQL as a query tool on top of that. So you can be very granular about what you get back from the API. And if you're not familiar with that, it's becoming a standard in terms of query languages against the APIs. So all of those are available today, and we've got a pretty robust messaging architecture there. On top of that, we built a service management layer for monitoring and managing the entire framework here. None of this sits on a server at CSI. It's all built in the cloud. It's all deployed through an Azure API deployment platform. And Ken and I both come out of the telecom environment, so we're pretty excited about our ability to scale this thing all over the world. We had that, excuse me, had that in mind from the beginning, that we needed to make sure that this doesn't slow down your applications at all. We needed the response times to be fast enough that you could rely on it in your user experience. So we built that to be scalable and deployed it on that platform. The top of this pyramid is about you. We're not building apps. We love the powered by Crosswalk as kind of an approach. And we're a business-to-business approach here, so we're looking to make this useful in your applications and portals as you build those, whether it's in the hackathon or when you go back to your day jobs. Just summarizing the feature list, it's all versions of master format, omni-class, and unit format since the 1995 version of master format. And again, master format has progressed roughly every 2 years along that line. So you can imagine what it's like to try to do the manually crosswalking from those formats just on master format alone. But omni-class and unit format are also there through this highly available API. All the cross-references between those standards and versions are there. And again, it's a RESTful state API. You can query it with GraphQL, and it's JSON and XML formats. It is an access key-based API, and that's how we're doing encryption and access as well, so that once you sign up and you get access to the platform, you'll be issued a key, and that key is how you work with the platform. I'll throw up a resource page here in just a minute that will show you where you can go to self-sign up for the access to the API, and then Ken and his team will issue you a key for you to use throughout the hackathon. There's lots of software documentation there. There's on that same portal that you'll see in just a minute, there's videos, getting started videos. I believe there's 6 that kind of walk you through, from beginning to end, how to get up to speed on the API. And there's a test platform through Get Postman that you can go prototype your solutions and see exactly how the API is going to react and how it's going to respond. So it's no mystery how the API is going to work. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of endpoints that you can access inside of the API. So it's useful to have a test platform out there, and access to that is provided to you as part of the resources that you can use during the hack and then even afterwards. There's also a GitHub with lots of code samples and documentation and things out there. And I don't have the GitHub, but I think Ken can provide that for us on the support-crosswalk when we get it to that point. This is a pretty busy slide, and the message here is that this is all cloud-based infrastructure. We've designed it in a way that allows us to do what we just laid out in terms of the roadmap to progress from an API through machine learning and the blockchain and into the Internet of Things. We know that we can do things like connect sensors and collect sensor data out there in the field to this platform as it scales. and everything in between that we've laid out. These tools are becoming a lot more consumable from the folks like Amazon and Microsoft, and we have certainly plugged into those tools where it's appropriate. Here's the resources that I talked about. So the main website for just kind of getting the PR and marketing information about the product is www.crosswalk.biz. I guess you don't need the dubs anymore, but crosswalk.biz will get you there. And that's kind of the marketing material. If you are interested in signing up for the API and getting access to the API, either now or after the hack, you can go to docs.crosswalk.digital. And if I recall, there's a self-service kind of place there where you can request access. And I don't think you have to have access to get access to the videos and those sorts of things. I'll let Ken weigh in on that in just a second. But that's where you can go to get your access for the technical side of that. If you need to reach out to us after the hackathon, you can certainly reach us at info@crosswalk.biz. That is a generalized email inbox that comes to Ken and myself. And during the hackathon, I would encourage you to post your questions, emotional outbursts, whatever, onto the support-crosswalk channel, because Ken and I are monitoring that pretty much 24/7. And we're here to help you be successful in using Crosswalk as part of your project during the hackathon. And again, if you're interested in learning more about our challenge, we're going to talk about that at 3 o'clock. We're giving out some prizes for the best use of Crosswalk in a project. And we added some kind of interesting bonuses to that today that we'll talk about at 3 o'clock to kind of even up the ante a bit around the prize money. So I'll stop here and see if there are any questions that Ken, maybe you collected that we can respond to, or open it up for the chat. If you guys have questions, please post them here and we'll try to respond to them.